You're listening to the What's the Fuzz podcast, where we break you out of your vacuum seal and get down to what's real. Never miss another episode again. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. And now, your host, Reiner.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of What's the Fuzz? So we're still in the tail end of September, and I'm joined by Izzy.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, to talk about the importance of representation and pushing for diversity in the fandom. Again, because unfortunately the recording we made before got corrupted. And when I say got corrupted, I mean I recorded on my laptop mic by accident. So, instead of making you all suffer, we're remaking the interview, and it'll be a little shorter than usual, but if you really want to listen to the full original cut, we'll be releasing it in the future because there was a lot of value in it. I just unfortunately messed it up. Now, with that out of the way, here's a little bit about the Weasel of the Hour. Izzy's an accomplished writer and editor that now owns his own indie publishing house called WeaselPress, which you can find over at www.weaselpress.com. And follow him over at Twitter at WeaselPress or at Systematic Weasel. He's penned works such as A Warm Place to Self-Destruct and Once More with Noise. Thank you so much for coming on the show again.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm always down to talk to anyone who's willing to talk to me.
I think you're worth listening to, if that means anything.
I mean, I maybe.
Yeah, I feel you. And you've got like a new book coming out, The Audacity of Your Bullshit, right?
Yeah, so my recent book, Once More with Noise, came out back in July. But I had this short collection of poetry that I was trying to get through a different publisher. But since it's been 90 days and I haven't heard back from any of the publishers I sent out to, I was like, fuck it. I'll just go ahead and do it myself. And it'll be coming out hopefully next month.
Oh, wow. So we should like pre-orders maybe on your website?
Pre-orders will probably happen soon. I would check out the WeaselPress Twitter account to see when that's going to happen.
All right, you heard him, guys. If you want to check that out, keep an eye on his Twitter account.
Definitely.
All right, let's get right into it. So, you're a Latina creative, right?
That's correct. I'm a Latinx creator.
Yeah.
And I'm an author on top of being an editor.
So, how did you mix your physical attributes or heritage in with your current persona?
Well, when I first created my persona, I hadn't thought about that originally, but the more my persona developed, the more me he became. So, if you were to strip the fur off of the character, you would see brown skin, much like my own. Our hair is fairly similar. Like even today, like I have a mixture of purple and green hair. So in a lot of ways, Izzy is me. By personality, by history, by just look. Granted, he's a little bit skinnier than I am, but shit happens. But he's me in a lot of ways, and he's my way to explore just different aspects about myself. Things like polyamory, things like certain kinks, or just ideas or anything of that nature. I throw a lot of myself into this character.
He's like your chalkboard.
Yeah.
You just throw ideas at him and you see if you like it or not.
Yeah, that's definitely it. I like to call him my muse in a way, too.
That's true. So just like thinking about him, you just get inspired to like create new poems and stuff.
Yeah. In fact, in Once More with Noise, I actually have a poem where he is the muse. So in my books, from Cut the Loss up until now, I try to have a section just for what I would call the muses, things that I found inspiring. I have a lot of discussions with older authors like Sylvia Plath or Jack Kerouac. And in this collection, Izzy appeared as a muse.
So you basically like got to talk to yourself almost.
Most definitely. It's a lot of, in a way, it's a lot of self-reflection while looking at a mirror without looking in the mirror.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how would you describe your sexuality slash gender identity?
The way I would describe my sexual identity is I'm pansexual, and I that wasn't always the case. I actually used Izzy as a drive to find my own sexuality. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
at first, we just identified as gay. That's what
Mm.
we were into. It was mostly cisgender men, and so since Izzy's creation, it's like all of that has flourished. Uh, I love sharing my time with all kinds of people, trans people, cisgender people. Uh, so like pansexual is the sexuality that fits me the best.
Hmm. So you started like challenging your preconceptions of what a man would be to you, and
Exactly,
then that transformed into like, well, maybe not just men, maybe something else.
exactly. It was just it was very much a freedom of expression and just challenging my own thoughts of what gender identity actually is. Because when I first started out in the
Mm-hmm.
fandom, I was more so libertarian. I was not
Yeah.
as liberal as I am today. So over the years, it took a lot of growing, and as I pushed my sexuality more, I found that you know everybody's body is great. It's not just cisgender men that I prefer anymore. So as we grew together, that's where my sexuality lied.
Yeah, it's a good way to like explore, find out that every flavor has something to offer.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Absolutely.
So do you feel like if you weren't a furry, then you would have a harder time finding these things out about yourself, that you wouldn't be able to like process your identity as well?
Oh, absolutely. So when I first found the furry fandom, I was also in other communities. I was in the metal community. I was in the horror community. And those two
Mm-hmm.
communities itself aren't exactly uh, welcoming to uh, people who like to explore gender identity. In fact, it's a bit dangerous in the horror community and in the metal community. The metal community is
Really?
very homophobic at times.
Oh
Same
wow.
with the horror community. So if I had just stuck with those two, I would have been very
Mm.
narrow minded.
Yeah, you would have been like set on a certain path and you wouldn't have strayed from that at all because you're just like so deep into those communities you wouldn't have a reason to question it.
Exactly, exactly, and that's one of the things that I'd like to look at in the future. Is I'd like to actually look at homophobia in the metal community because you don't get that talked about too much. And there are queer icons in metal, icons like Rob Halford or
Mm.
Doug Pinnick from King's X, but it's
Hmm.
not a overpowering or overwhelming uh, community there. It's still very much a libertarian community mindset where it's like I can say the
Mm.
word faggot just because it's free speech. It's very much that kind of mindset in metal.
Yeah.
So
They don't really think beyond the implications of what they're doing.
exactly, exactly. So as I grew more into furry, I also grew more into the punk scene, which punk and furry are very similar in a lot of ways, where they explore sexuality and gender.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's even a punk movement called queercore that started way back in the 60s and the 70s. There's a documentary on Amazon all about that, and it's very interesting.
It's called queercore.
Hmm.
Okay, that sounds actually kind of badass, not gonna lie to you.
Oh, it is.
But hey, I absolutely am behind you on checking out these facets that have gone pretty much unchecked by anyone because they just like turn a blind eye to it, or they're just like, they're just like that. They're just that way. But no one thinks to ask why are they that way? Can we do something about it? Can we change something about it to make them feel a bit more accepting?
Oh yeah, most definitely. And like when you look at metal communities, like if you go onto Reddit or if you just talk to
Hmm.
people, they will tell you that anyone is welcome. Whether you're queer or not, like anyone is welcome. But they still hold on to using homophobic slurs, and that's where the problem is. It's not always a, oh, I hate this person. It is a, I'm going to use the slur because I can and I will.
Yeah, exactly. But it's it goes so much deeper than
Oh,
that, but
absolutely.
people don't know that. That's why it's so frustrating. It's like, yes, you're saying hello, hello, but you're also making me feel like I am some kind of alien when I try to join you. It's
Exactly. It,
uncomfortable
it,
that
it,
way.
it alienates people in a way that they don't understand. And so I'm curious as to see uh, what the community is like today because I haven't really been so involved recently.
Mm,
And I'm curious to see how, you know, why they feel it's still okay to use that language. Because even with metal icons, like take Megadeth, he
mm,
he talks on stage all the time about how gay marriage shouldn't even be legal. So you have people in the metal community that aren't being canceled as of yet because they're huge fans of bands like Megadeth, uh,
hmm.
and it's just a sad sight.
It is, it is. And it sounds kind of like a more extreme version of what the furry fandom was like a few years ago, where people would join the fandom and think that they were the only person of color, and then the accomplishments that furs of color did make got shit on a ton. So it's like, is this really for me? Should I really be in this fandom?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. When your community starts alienating people, it's time to change, and the metal community is not so adaptive yet.
Exactly. It's it makes a case for why diversity is important,
Hmm.
no matter where you go.
Yeah,
So, what do you think is the driving force for why you push for diversity in the furry fandom?
I I want to quit being alienated. I want to feel like I'm actually a part of the fandom. I mean, I know I'm in the fandom, and I know
Mm-hmm.
that this fandom can be very welcoming. But when you do things that alienate us, it doesn't feel welcoming to us. So I'm pushing
Mm.
for it simply because this is our fandom, and we need to be able to feel comfortable in our fandom. If we can't feel comfortable with this, then why are we here? And what are you doing for us?
Yeah, exactly. Especially when furries get so uncomfortable when people like even just passively just bring up that they're black or Latino or something. Like it's supposed to be like a big statement when it is not.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of colorblind racism that's in the fandom. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there's this belief where once you create your character, you're stripping yourself of your skin, so your race doesn't really matter when you create your character. But when it comes to like gender and sexuality, that matters 10 times more. And I'm not saying those don't matter, but we also need to have a healthy and productive discussion about race. And the fandom has just not ever been comfortable with doing that.
Exactly. Like people talk about pansexual or bisexual erasure, but when you're colorblind, that is literally just erasing someone's identity, their ethnic, their heritage, their nationality. These things matter to that person. That's what makes them up.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you take that away, it alienates them.
And what we should be doing is moving towards a point where people don't feel alienated anymore.
Hmm.
We should be seeing more BIPOC furs like joining the fandom because they saw positivity rather than negativity. No one wants to check their Twitter feed to see that I don't know, people are upset that Ken Cougar only got like 5 seconds of screen time in the fandom documentary. That shouldn't have been a thing in the first place. It should have been like Ken Cougar has like 10 minutes or 15 minutes of or something.
Yeah, yeah, and when you look at the fandom documentary, I mean, there were
Mm,
BIPOC furries in there. They just weren't shown that much. And my
mm,
critique of it was, why not? Why weren't we shown that much? You know, this whole movie has a large portion of white furries, and you give maybe 5 minutes to BIPOC furries. One, how is that fair? And two, how is that right?
yeah, exactly. Especially when the people watching just say, "Oh, it's a good movie." But it's not like the only piece of media that is about furries that's out there that discusses furry origins or their topics or anything. So this documentary in particular could have gone in that direction. It could have been like, "Hey, this fandom has colored roots. It has roots here and here, and it's not just this fandom with like one face. That face being a a gay white guy with affiliation with geek culture. There's more out there than that."
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, to my knowledge, and there may be more than this, but to my knowledge, there's three fandom made documentaries. Um,
Hmm.
One's called Personas. Um, and I believe that's directed by Dominic Rodriguez. Um, and then there's another one. I think it's just called Furry or something of that nature, or Furries. But all three of these movies put a large focus on white people. Like I don't think there's hardly any. I know in furries there's barely any BIPOC furs in that. I think you saw glimpses of us in like the backgrounds, but I don't think there were any interviews. And it was such a short documentary. I think it's like 30 minutes. And then there's like personas where he had all of these furries in there, like all these white furs in there. But it was filled with furs who were problematic. There were furs
Hmm.
who were almost anti-queer in a way, and then there were queer positive furs. It was a very weird documentary towards the end there. But all three fandom documentaries do pretty much nothing to uh, amplify BIPOC voices.
Hey, maybe we can change that in the future. That's what I'm hoping for.
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to see BIPOC furries do a documentary because I don't think there will be a white filmmaker to do it with to do it for us. So I think that's something that we should be working on ourselves.
Hey, you never know. Maybe What's the Fuzz could help fund that. We never
Yeah,
know. 2021, let's see.
yeah. Never know.
So on to the writing part. How did you get started in writing? How long have you been doing it?
Um, that's a long time. So I started when I was. I mean, I did it in high school. I did whatever high school trash that I had. But I
Hmm.
didn't start taking it seriously until about college, where I took a creative writing class. Um, and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with what we were doing. I fell in love with just the feedback that I was getting from other authors that were in the class. We would talk about ideas, talk about techniques, uh, and the class really pushed me to bring out my best. So once it ended, I was like, well, I have to keep going. I have to keep doing this. And it helped that my teacher was available even um, after I had left the class. So I was able to go back and talk to him every so often. Uh, on top of that, I worked for the San Jacinto College arts magazine, where I would help bring in writing that would be paired with art in the magazine. So uh, I've been writing for about a decade, I would say, and I
Hmm.
have several books. I mean, I can't even count them at this point, but there's a lot of them out there. Um, and it's mostly been focused on poetry with a couple of short fiction books here and there.
So things really kicked off for you in college, and you just ran from there.
Hmm.
Just set your life from there.
Oh yeah. When I started college, I started everything. It was like questioning my own sexuality and uh, writing and everything. It was just a big a big boost for me.
What were some of your earliest inspirations or people that you looked up to when you were just starting out?
Um, well, I had a lot. I first started out with horror writers like Edgar Allan Poe in high school. Um,
Hmm.
and then I moved up to the Beat generation when I was in college. So like Allen Ginsberg's Howl was a big inspiration for me. Uh, Today I have a lot of different viewpoints on that poem, but it was monumental for me at the time. And then there was a lot of slam pieces, uh, slam poets from like Buddy Wakefield, Andrea Gibson, um, Anis Moshkani, just a lot of that. And slam poetry really took off for me. I love that performance, and I love that activism that they were pushing for at the time. Um, and it's been really great to see how slam has taken off from there. Um, but yeah, those have been my main influences. In fact, I still go back to Buddy Wakefield every so often. I was very fortunate to meet him last year before I moved away from Texas.
So those performances really inspired you to like get out of your own shell and just like reach for things you didn't know you could reach for.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when it came to like Buddy Wakefield and Andrea Gibson, just talking about
Mm.
queerness and um, trying to define that for myself. Like they were pinnacle for me. Uh, and just watching them here and there, watching their YouTube videos and getting their books. That kind of helped push my writing in the direction that I wanted it to go.
What's your most memorable moment when either performing or watching slam poetry?
Um, I've got a lot of interesting readings that I have taken part in. Uh, there was one night we it was me and a few other poets. We hit up the this bar. It's called Natsuo's, which is basically
Yeah.
Houston spelled backwards. Um,
Mm.
and Natsuo's was a it used to be an old department store. I think it was a shoe store at one point, and then it just became a bar. And so
Mhm.
when you go in there, the door's always open. It's very low light, and there's a stage. So we hit the stage. Uh, and I'm just kind of like I'm doing whatever I'm doing. I'm throwing down, uh, and you can't see it on camera, but there's this guy that just comes in and he sits down for like a minute or two, and then he lights up a crack pipe, and he's just kind of sitting there and he's smoking, and I'm like, cool, this is
Very
happening,
casually.
and he looks at one of my books and he grabs it, just kind of flips through it, and he just walks out. And I'm like, I'm not even going to chase after him. If someone's got the courage just to sit down, light up a crack pipe, and then just take a book, like I'm just gonna let them have it.
Yeah, honestly.
So, but then like I think it was like a couple weeks later, we hit up this place called Super Happy Funland, in which
Mm.
the people who worked there, they also lived there. So it was like an artist kind of commune in a way, but you could hear
Yeah.
everything. The bathrooms didn't really work that much. The bathrooms were like paper thin, so if you're having sex in there or anything, you could hear it. Um, it used to be this old theater and then an antique shop, and then they just kind of took it over. And it was in the middle of like the abandoned warehouse district. Um, and it's like it's a scary place when you walk in there, but it's also fun and atmospheric. Um, a lot of stuff didn't really work, and there was a giant wall of like Annabelle style dolls just kind of hanging there. So I was like, cool, this will be interesting.
Fun and atmospheric only to a horror fan. I would have been out there. There is no way.
Yeah, and like the building itself is again, and it's in the middle of the warehouse district, which is mostly abandoned. So you're not getting
Ah,
much traffic. It's very quiet.
oh my god, dude. I would feel the skin crawling off of my arm. I could not handle it.
Oh,
But
it was interesting. Whether I almost got killed or not, I don't really know, but shit happens.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, it's what you do for the arts. You
Exactly.
got to be in tuned with your spirit, and I guess that's one way to get your spirit to come out.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, could you tell us a little bit of what you've got going on Weasel Press?
So yeah, there's a lot of things going on right now. We have a anthology that's seeking personal essays from BIPOC furries called "Can You See Us Now?"
Mm-hmm.
And it's just we want BIPOC experiences, whether good, bad, the ugly. Like we want it all, um, and we want them to be as true as possible. So send us your stories and we'll read them and we'll get back to you on them. It is a paid anthology. It's a half cent per word plus a copy of the book itself. So we're taking submissions on that up until January, I believe. So there's time, but definitely send us something. If you have questions on it, you can email me. It's the dude at weaselpress.com, um, or you can just shoot a email through our contact form on WeaselPress website, weaselpress.com. As for my own personal writing, I have the book The Audacity of Your Bullshit that's coming out next month, and I'm waiting on edits to come back. But I have a horror book that's coming out next year called Carnage, that focuses on domestic violence in horror, where I look at uh, characters in relationships and how domestic violence affects each relationship and what that looks like. Uh, and then on top of that, I'm also working with Thurston Howe Publications to do another diversity anthology. And so you can find that on the Weasel Press Submittable or THP's website, thurstonhowepublications.com.
Oh man, you are one busy guy.
I am, and it's a lot of work, but I'm up for the task. I've run Weasel Press for almost a decade now, just on my own. I've had little help here and there from people and volunteers, but most of what has been done with Weasel Press has been done on my own. So I'm very much eager to throw myself into all of it.
Well, I hope you get so many submissions that you don't even have any time to get through all of them.
I hope we get a lot of submissions too, but I guarantee you I'm going to read every single one of them.
I appreciate your tenacity.
Well, it's like we had a project. We had two projects that were open called Ordinary Madness and
Hmm.
Vagabonds, Anthology of the Mad Ones, and we got
Yeah.
maybe 200 submissions, just combined, and I had to go
Damn.
through all of them pretty much. So, and each submission, like each form, carries about 5 pieces. So, like when you're looking at it, it's way more than 200. It's just 200 forms.
So basically, you were just reading every day for morning, noon, night for like weeks on
Oh
end.
yeah, absolutely. And
Wow.
how it's like we get all of these submissions in and we can only take so much, so it's like our acceptance rate is maybe 10% of what we get.
What? How do you even decide that? That's like worse than the Hunger Games or something. Damn.
Yeah, it's a lot, but as an editor you have to go in with a mind of like what you want the journal to look like. So for Vagabonds
Ah,
I wanted
yeah.
a very much a BIPOC strong and queer focused book. So
Hmm.
I focused on a lot of authors who were BIPOC and or queer, and I tried to mesh those experiences together. Uh, a lot of what we received coincided with all of our submission guidelines. So we had a lot of BIPOC voices, we had a lot of queer voices, and we had a lot of voices who were disabled. So we were able to funnel all of that through, and I'm really happy with what we've selected. So I can't wait to get that journal out in like a month or two.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
So we got the last set of questions for you right here.
Okay.
So why should people of color beyond black also care about Black Lives Matter?
Because what happens to Black lives happens to us, and it's we're all in this together in a way. We need to help out Black Lives Matter and push that movement forward because it's going to make change better for everybody. Defunding police, defunding ICE, all of that, all of those terrorist type organizations. If we help Black Lives Matter, we can help defund all of it. And that's what we want and that's what we need in this country.
I couldn't agree more. It really breaks my heart to see Mexican and Puerto Rican people like turning their backs on black people and calling them the N word and telling them to get away from their shops as if they're treated any better at all.
Exactly. It's like, it's not, I mean, as a brown person in this country, a lot of my experiences I share with the black community. I am afraid to go into the grocery store a lot. I am followed in the grocery store. I'm afraid of what happens to me when I get pulled over. Like a lot of those experiences we share, and so we should be fighting for the same things. We should be unified.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, not to go on a tangent here, but when I was doing Lyft, I did ride with a guy. He was a white guy, but he looked Mexican. So he actually went to one of the first protests here because he got pulled over so many times because the cops would think that he was a Mexican, but he was actually a white guy. And
Mhm.
that made him realize that there was something wrong with the system.
Yeah. So yeah, we need to pull together, and hopefully, Latinx community, we can get out there and do more.
We can only hope.
Yeah.
So, do you feel as though the BLM movement is the push the fandom needed to start having open conversations about race? Did we need to have it in the first place?
Well, we absolutely needed to have it in the first place. Uh, we needed to have it uh, sooner than now, honestly. But I do
Mm,
think Black Lives Matter helped facilitate uh, a conversation within the fandom, especially when you look at everything that's going on today. With
hmm
Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Tamir Rice, like all of those names have had issues with the police. They died because of the police. And people are out there and they're protesting because there's so much injustice, and because that's being seen today, it's facilitating a conversation of race, and it's getting ugly in a lot of ways in the fandom. It's getting not so ugly in other ways. It's getting colorblind in a lot of ways. I
hmm
mean, we saw it with the Writers Guild chat just a few weeks ago when I did my review of the fandom documentary, where people were saying, "I
Yes.
don't understand why you're talking about race. This documentary wasn't about race at all." And it's like, well, that's the point. That's why we're talking about this now, so it can be talked about through other types of media and through representation.
Like, as much as you might love Uncle Cage or whatever, you can't tell me that seeing like three or four brown faces wouldn't have made it feel a bit more rounded.
Exactly, or just giving more time to the faces that you did have. Like
hmm
there was definitely representation in there, but it was just so minimal that you forgot about them.
But on the bright side, as one of my other guests pointed out, there are more spaces being created. Like there's groups splintering off, creating their own spaces. More people are coming in from that to meet other BIPOC furs because then they're like, oh, there's more than just me.
Hmm.
And it's just like this revelation, like, oh my gosh, there's like 200 other people. I'm not insane. I'm not like stuck in this milk toast world.
Yeah, exactly. It's exciting, but at the same time, it's something that should have happened way sooner than what it has.
Have you ever faced discrimination or known someone having to deal with it when writing / publishing a work in the fandom?
So a lot of my interactions are outside the fandom. I don't talk to a lot of furries. Um, I know, just from publishing in general, I've received death threats from authors because I haven't accepted their work. Uh, I've received uh, a lot of racial slurs. I've been called a fucking stink weasel. I've been called a spick, a faggot, everything under the sun, like you can name. Um, but I don't get a lot of furry queries outside of anthologies. And when it comes to anthologies, like we don't get a lot of interaction from furries in general. I know just from interacting outside of publishing, it's a lot of it's a lot of oh, the word just escaped my head, but it's a lot of passive aggressive racism. A lot of things like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I didn't know you were brown," or I'll get called, um, hood dick or something. Like it's a lot of that I get in the fandom.
Goddamn hood
Yeah,
dick, dude. Every time you, it's just there. God, gotta hate Grinder.
yeah. Um, like even my past partner is a furry, and he would always say, um, and he'd always follow it up with like, "This is a joke," but it always pissed me off. But he would always say like, "I'm gonna sell you for a peso," and he was a white partner, uh, and that always infuriated me whenever he said that.
Jesus Christ. Okay, as much as you joke about that, maybe don't.
Yeah, I mean, no, I wasn't
Like,
joking about that and about that specifically. No, that was something that my past
no,
partner
no.
did. That was very
I know. That's just like me saying to like a black partner or something that I was gonna cut off their hands and sell it on the black market. Like, that's not funny.
yeah, yeah. And I know like my current partner, Hal, has received a lot of discrimination from the fandom too, because when we were doing Omer, Hal put out a book called "Blood Criminals: Living with HIV in 21st Century America," and in the book they talk about the stigma that is created around HIV and just the death threats that they've received on Grinder. And pretty recently, it was a few months ago, that they received a lot of death threats on Twitter just because our Omer account uh, tweeted or retweeted the book and retweeted um, just some knowledge on HIV, and that upset a lot of conservative furries at the time. So uh, yeah, both myself and my partner have been discriminated against in this fandom.
Stay mad, conservators. Stay mad.
Damn right.
So, what are the steps we need to start taking to unify the fandom, in your opinion?
I think it starts with representation. I think when we get good representation in the fandom, that can change perceptions of BIPOC furs from white furries. That can help fight a little bit of the colorblind racism. Because representation matters in media. It really does. Look at how uh, BIPOC people are portrayed in movies, films like Annabelle, where you have a black woman who's basically the agent of like, I'm gonna help this white family in this movie. Like she's basically there just to help that family. Or just like in horror in general, like people of color are there to help and then die. That's all it is, and you don't really see that challenged often. We see it pretty recently with like Machete in Robert Rodriguez's movie, where he portrays all the white people as just these terrible, nasty individuals. But when I watched it, I was like, no, this happens. Like that white person, whenever they said, that's how they are, and so that representation matters, and it's important for BIPOC furries to see that they matter in this fandom, and it starts with being properly represented.
Yeah, when you're used to seeing people, quote unquote, that look like you all the time, you get accustomed to seeing somebody post a real life picture and it's like a white person. But there's like this elation that you feel
Yeah,
when it turns out to be a brown person or a black person. You're like, oh my god, That's so cool. They're doing this thing and they're out there and wow, look at that.
Yeah,
I can get somewhere.
yeah, exactly. And it's like white has become such a social norm for the world. It's unreal. I mean, if you go back a few years um, and look at the Hermione incident where uh, people were arguing whether Hermione could be black or not, and it's like, well, yeah, of
Oh,
course she can,
yeah.
because the author never coded that character to be white or black or Latinx, so it could be whatever you imagine it as a reader. Not that I'm advocating for J.K. Rowling or anything, because J.K. Rowling's a pretty terrible person, but that was a
Yes.
conversation we were having just a few years ago at the time, because people couldn't see a non-coded character as anything other than white.
Yeah, that is true. That is a little odd for it to be the default.
Exactly.
But nonetheless, that is how most people would perceive it. So it's like, Hermione's white. Fuck, why would she be black?
E-
why can't she be black?
Exactly. And that's a question that was brought up then. It's like, well, why can't this character be black, or why can't this character be Latinx? Why does the character have to uh, be white as a default? Why can't we see ourselves in the media that we're reading?
Yeah, and don't get me started on like superhero shit that does that.
Oh,
Like
absolutely. I mean, Spider-Man is probably one of the biggest examples right now, or Captain America.
he literally in the comic books though, like what how are you going to be mad?
Yeah.
I just don't understand it.
Yeah, it's crazy, but that's why we need to be pushing for proper representation so we can change those perceptions.
Exactly. Now, here's the last question I got for you. I want to end it on a positive ish note. Do you have anything out there to say to the BIPOC furries that are afraid to be an outsider in an otherwise super inviting and welcoming community?
I would say go all in, be yourself, and go all in. There are some pretty bad aspects to this fandom, pretty racist aspects to this fandom, uh, but you can't let that affect you and you as a person. Um, go out there, throw your art or throw everything into your art or your character, and just be yourself. And if you're a writer, tell your truth. That's all you can do is tell your truth. Um, there are people who are definitely welcoming, and there are people who you can you can be in a community with. So there are some pretty positive spaces here. Um, but just again, be yourself and throw yourself into it 100%.
Absolutely. Don't give up hope. And if you are a BIPOC fur out there that doesn't know, there is a Furs of Color chat that I have linked in the show notes below. All right. I think that's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for coming on the show again,
Thanks for having
Izzy.
me.
Yeah, anytime. Maybe you could come on even again sometime in the future. Who knows?
Well, I'm willing to talk to anyone and everyone.
Alright. That is so good of you. It was great chatting, and I think I understand why diversity matters in the fandom, and, well, some other things. But guys, don't forget to sub wherever you're listening to. You got the spotlight to promote one last thing as you go for it.
So check out WeaselPress.com. We have a lot of really cool things happening. We have a lot of submission calls. And publishing can only thrive with your support. So please do us a favor. Check out www.weaselpress.com or hit us up on Twitter at WeaselPress is our Twitter account. So hit us up, get in touch with me, and if you have ideas or anything, I'd love to hear from you.
Alright. See you next time, guys. Peace.